there's a specific kind of pain that only smart men understand. It's not the pain of failing. It's the pain of knowing exactly what you're capable of and watching yourself fail anyway. You're not lazy. You're not stupid. You've read the books. You've watched the videos. You probably know more about discipline, productivity, and self-mastery than most men twice your age. And yet here you are. Again. Same hour lost to your phone. Same promise broken to yourself. Same quiet voice at 2 a.m. that whispers, "Tomorrow I start." So let me ask you something nobody else will ask you directly. If you are this intelligent, why does your life still feel like it's running on autopilot? Why can you analyze a business problem in 10 minutes, but you can't get yourself to the gym 3 days in a row? Why can you give your friend perfect advice about discipline, about women, about ambition, and then go home and do the exact opposite? This isn't a willpower problem. And it's definitely not an intelligence problem. It's something deeper. Something almost nobody talks about. And once you see it, you will never look at your own behavior the same way again. Here's what this trap looks like from the inside. You have a bad week. Maybe it's stress, maybe it's boredom, maybe it's just a slow Tuesday with nothing to do. So you fall back into old patterns, explicit content, doom scrolling, hours disappearing into nothing. And then guilt arrives right on schedule. So you do what smart men do. You research the problem. You find the videos. You study about dopamine, about discipline, about the 75 hard challenge and the cold showers and the 5 a.m. wake-up routines. For 3, maybe 4 days, you're a new man. Then life happens. A bad night's sleep. A stressful meeting. A breakup. A lonely Friday. And you're right back where you started, except now there's a new layer of shame stacked on top of the old one. This is the cycle. And if you're honest with yourself, you've lived through some version of it more times than you'd like to admit. Here's the part that matters most and the part nobody tells you. This is not a character flaw. It's a design flaw. You are not broken. You are responding correctly to a broken system. Your environment is engineered, quite literally engineered, by some of the smartest product designers in the world to capture your attention and hijack your reward circuitry. The apps on your phone are A/B tested by teams of behavioral scientists whose entire job is to make you open them one more time. You are not losing a fair fight. You are losing a rigged one, and you've been blaming yourself for the rigging. That doesn't mean you have no responsibility. You do. But there's a difference between responsibility and shame. Shame keeps you stuck. Responsibility is the only thing that's ever moved a man forward. So let's stop asking what's wrong with me and start asking the only question that actually matters. Why does knowing the right thing to do almost never translate into doing it? Let me tell you about a man I'll call David. Not his real name, but if you've felt stuck before, you'll recognize him immediately. Because he is most of us at some point. David was sharp. Top of his class in university. The kind of guy who could read a 300-page book in a weekend and actually retain it. But David had a secret war going on inside him. Every night ended the same way, phone in hand, promising himself he'd sleep early. And then suddenly it's 3 a.m. and he doesn't even remember the last hour. David did what smart men do. He researched. He became, in his words, a self-improvement scholar. He could quote Cal Newport on Focus. He could explain dopamine sensitization in clinical detail. He knew about habit stacking, about the 2-minute rule, about identity-based habits from Atomic Habits. He had more self-improvement knowledge than most certified coaches. And he was still stuck. This is the part that should unsettle you a little. David's problem was never information. He had plenty of that. His problem was that information and transformation live in two completely different parts of the brain. Knowing what to do lives in your prefrontal cortex, the rational, logical part of your brain. The part that watches YouTube videos and nods along thinking, yeah, that makes sense. But doing, actually changing behavior under stress, boredom, or temptation, that's governed by something older. Something faster. Something that doesn't care how many books you've read. This is why you can know, with complete certainty, that scrolling at midnight is destroying your sleep, your focus, and your mornings, and do it anyway. Not because you're stupid. Because knowledge was never the bottleneck. You don't have an information problem. You have an implementation problem. And nobody sells implementation. Everybody sells information. That's why the internet is flooded with advice and starving for actual transformation. Here's something I want you to sit with, not to scare you, but because most men never actually calculate this number. If you lose 2 hours a day to mindless scrolling, low-grade distraction, and recovering from poor sleep, that's not 2 hours. That's roughly 30 full days. An entire month of your one life, every single year, spent in a fog you didn't choose and don't even enjoy. Multiply that by 5 years, by 10. That's not just lost time. That's lost momentum. Lost confidence. Lost versions of yourself that never got the chance to exist. The version who finished the business, who got in real shape, who had the energy to pursue the relationship he actually wanted instead of settling for distraction. This is the part nobody wants to say out loud, so I'll say it plainly. The cost of staying the same is not neutral. It's not staying safe. It's actively expensive. Every day you postpone the real change is a day you're paying. In confidence, in clarity, in self-respect, even if you don't see the bill yet. And here's the cruel part. The longer the cycle repeats, the more it starts to feel normal. You stop being shocked by it. You build a quiet identity around it. I've always been like this. And that identity becomes the real prison, far more than the habit itself ever was. You don't want to be 35 looking back at 25 wondering where the version of you who actually executed went. That man isn't gone. He's just been buried under 1,000 small surrenders, and he's waiting for one thing. Let's go back to David for a second, because his story has a turning point, and it's the same turning point available to you right now. David's breakthrough didn't come from a better motivational video. It came from a conversation with a mentor who said something that initially annoyed him. The mentor said, "You keep trying to win a battle of willpower at midnight, alone, exhausted, with your guard completely down. You will lose that battle almost every time. Not because you're weak, because that is the worst possible moment to fight it." David sat with that for a long time. Willpower is a terrible long-term strategy because willpower is a depleting resource. It's strongest in the morning and weakest at night, exactly when most of his temptations showed up. Relying on willpower alone is like trying to hold back a flood with your bare hands. You might manage it for a night, maybe a week. But eventually, exhaustion wins. It's not a fair fight, and pretending it is just sets you up for another round of unnecessary shame. So what actually worked? He stopped trying to fight the urge in the moment and started redesigning the moments before the urge ever arrived. This single idea is the framework I want to teach you. It's called environment design, and once you understand it, you'll start noticing how much of your life has been shaped by environments you never consciously chose. Here is the core truth behind environment design. You don't need more willpower. You need fewer decisions. Every single habit you have, good or bad, exists because of a loop. A cue triggers an urge. The urge drives a routine. The routine delivers a reward. And the brain remembers, this path leads to relief, so take it again. Most men try to break this loop in the hardest possible place, right in the middle, at the moment of the urge, using sheer force of will. Environment design works differently. Instead of fighting the urge, you make the cue harder to encounter in the first place. If your phone is on your nightstand, you will check it. Not because you're weak, because proximity creates probability. Move the charger to another room, and the entire loop loses its starting point before it begins. If your default evening is silence and solitude, your brain will reach for stimulation, and your phone is the easiest stimulation in human history. But if your evening has a built-in next step, a short walk, a page of a book, a call with someone you respect, the brain doesn't have to fight a craving. It simply has somewhere else to go. This is the quiet secret behind almost every man who appears to have iron discipline. It's rarely raw willpower. It's that he's removed himself far enough from temptation that discipline barely needs to show up. He didn't get strong enough to resist the environment. He got smart enough to change it. This is also why information alone will never be enough to fix this. You can know everything about dopamine and habit loops, and still lose if your room, your phone, your default hours of boredom are still arranged exactly the way they were before. Insight without redesign is just well-informed repetition. Environment design isn't about becoming a monk. It's about making the right choice the easy choice, and the wrong choice slightly inconvenient, because in the moment of temptation, even small inconvenience is often enough to break the spell. I want to paint you a realistic picture here. Not a fantasy. A realistic one. This isn't about becoming a different person overnight, and it's not about never struggling again. Anyone who promises you that is selling you something hollow. It's about something quieter and honestly more powerful. It's waking up without dread, not because every day is easy, but because you trust yourself again. You've kept enough small promises to yourself that breaking one doesn't feel inevitable anymore. It's sitting in silence without needing to reach for your phone to fill the space. Discomfort stops being something you flee from and starts being something you can simply sit with. It's the specific, grounded confidence that doesn't come from achievement, but from alignment. The simple, rare feeling of being a man whose actions match his words. Even to himself. Especially to himself. He doesn't need to prove anything to a room. He's not chasing validation because he's no longer at war with himself. That man isn't a fantasy. I've watched ordinary men become him, not through motivation, but through structure, repetition, and the right environment, sustained over months, not days. The only real question is whether you build toward becoming him on purpose, or whether you keep waiting for motivation to magically deliver him to you one random Monday morning. It won't. Motivation was never the variable that mattered. Here's the uncomfortable truth about everything you just learned. Knowing about environment design will not, by itself, change your life. Just like knowing about calories doesn't make a man lean, and knowing about compound interest doesn't make a man rich. You now understand the what. But most men, even ones who genuinely want to change, get stuck on the how. How do you redesign your environment when you don't fully see your own blind spots? How do you stay accountable when nobody's checking? How do you keep going on week 3 when the initial motivation has worn off and the old pool starts whispering again? This is exactly where most self-improvement journeys quietly die. Not from lack of desire, from lack of structure. Because here's what almost nobody admits: willpower fails alone. Systems survive contact with real life, but only if someone helps you build them correctly the first time. Trying to do this entirely solo means you're not just fighting your urges. You're also trying to be your own researcher, your own psychologist, your own accountability partner, and your own coach, all at once, usually at 11 p.m., exhausted after a full day of work. That's not a fair expectation to put on yourself. It never was. Every man who has actually rebuilt his life, not performed it for a camera, but genuinely rebuilt it, had some form of structure outside his own head. A mentor, a program, a community holding the standard when his own motivation inevitably dipped. Because no man sees his own blind spots clearly from the inside. That's not a flaw in him. That's just how blind spots work by definition. So here's where this leaves you. You now understand the cycle isn't your fault. It's a trap built by environment and habit loops far older and far more sophisticated than your willpower. You understand that information was never the missing piece, and that's exactly why more videos, more books, more advice will keep giving you temporary motivation and no lasting transformation. You understand the real lever, which is environment design, and why the men who look disciplined from the outside have usually just engineered their world so discipline barely needs to show up. And you understand that doing this completely alone, with no structure and no accountability, is the single biggest reason smart, capable men stay stuck for years instead of months. If you've made it this far in the video, some part of you already knows you're ready to stop researching and start building. If you're serious about breaking this cycle, I've put together a free program in the description that walks you through this exact process. Step by step, how to redesign your environment, rebuild your habit loops, and create the structure that makes this change last, instead of fading out like every other attempt before it. You don't need more motivation tonight. You need a system that works even on the nights you don't feel motivated at all. That's what's waiting for you in the description. The cycle ends when you decide it does. Not someday. Now.